everyone, it's Martha Novak here, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. How fun all of us being together today. We're talking about how to be happy through authenticity, being our real selves and not something that is a mask. Having done both in my life, I'm going to tell you, this is a better way to be. And I think that you all will find that too. Guys, I appreciate you being with us so much. And please know that if you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, we are also giving a broadcast on Facebook Live. By the way, so everybody knows, no matter what venue you're listening to, you can go to our website, which is Martha Novak, NOVAK.com, and under radio shows, they have little buttons, so you can either listen or watch on Facebook Live or listen on Blog Talk Radio. Pardon me, no coronavirus here. But pollen out the wazoo. Oh, my goodness, everybody I know is coughing. There is a big thing of pollen floating around out there. You can almost see it in the air. And so we all get choked from time to time. Everybody up here understands that. And we just go, ugh. It's a little embarrassing to do on the air, though, isn't it? All right, guys. We are making our way through some very complicated subjects to talk about, really. I think our darling cat last week said, please go back. We want to talk about what we want to hear about my last point, which I did hurry through last week in more detail. So I'm going to do that today. I can't tell you what an important subject authenticity is. I mean, it's what every single show I've ever done with you has been about. It's what I've been lecturing about for many, many years. And it makes a real change in your life. You see, it is against the principle, isn't it, when we live artificially, when we live through a mask, it is against the principle that we all are here for a reason, to give something to this world in some way through our knowledge, our values, our gifts, our talents, our thoughts, our beliefs, our whatever. We're supposed to add to the intelligence here in some fashion and to some degree. So when we wear a mask, we really are doing a disservice to that. And I want to tell you, there's no other reason for you to be here than that, to learn to express who you are, because that is love itself. Let's do a quick prayer. I'm going to get on the same page, and then I'm going to go back into this, and here we go. Ready? Dear God, thank you so much for all of us being together again. We love the community that we have here. And we now ask to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do in terms of this information right now, today, tomorrow. We need to see our journey in steps. We need to make those steps, but sometimes they're not clear. We confuse ourselves. Confusion is one of those nice things that sometimes we cloud ourselves with so we don't have to move. We understand that's part of the egoic child's mind and part of the system, but we ask now that we see through the cloud of confusion and we do know the next steps to take for ourselves, for our happiness, for our authenticity, and for who we really are as you. Thank you so much, dear God, for being the aspect of us. We are the aspect of you, I should say. And we thank you so much for the opportunity to live in that energy of you. We thank you so much. And so it is. Amen. Okay, good. You know, what I was saying, and I'm not quite awake yet, we have been partying up a storm. And you think, what are we doing? We're doing everything socially acceptable But we had a lake cleanup yesterday, and I was out in the sun for a good part of the day. That is real different for me because I'm not a sun person, as you can see from my fair skin. And it just wore me out. Wow. And I think that, plus some dehydration, did me in. So my brain was not on yet, and hopefully it'll trigger sometime soon. All right. I think, Kat, and you'll have to tell me if this was true or not, that where we stopped was when I said you've got to learn that your fear is not a force in itself. It feels like a force, and we're going to talk about why. I think this is an important subject to talk about in more detail, so thank you so much for asking me to go back and fill in the blanks. Fear is love that you learned as a child that could not be itself for whatever reason. I mean, years ago, I remember having a client whose father could not love. He wanted everybody to fear him. Now, keep in mind, the reason one does that is insecurity. So if you recognize that in yourself, we need to work on your insecurity. Because this man did not want a family that loved him. And what is at the base of this? If you want a family that fears you, you're afraid of losing control, aren't you? Right? I know people who have created big families because they're fearful in a different way. They wanted to have a community they could control because they don't know how to get along with people outside if they raise little kids. But guys, is that a real good reason to have kids? No, it's not. I've just been reading, again, one of my absolute favorite authors, who's Pat Conroy. He died in March of 2016. He's one of my favorite authors. He's marvelous. One of the things he wrote was The Great Santini. He wrote it about his father, who was one of these people that wanted everybody to fear him. He was in the military. It was interesting because he goes on to say, and he wrote another book called The Death of Santini, about how his father changed after that book. And good for him, you know. I can't tell you how many people, and this has been going on for years, come into my life, come into sessions, and they say, I've had absolutely no relationship with my sons, my daughters, with my wife, and I'm in my 70s, and they'll say, I miss them. I need them now. And it's like, okay, well, we have to go back and put some things in place and get rid of that insecurity that made you distort love. Now, a lot of times just kids distort love. You know, everything is about a child in the ego child's mind, and that's what you have in addition to your highest self. When we're kids, everything is about us. We are seeing ourselves relative to everything that happens. So let's say you have a workaholic mother or father. You see everything relative to that. In other words, you're not interesting enough. You're not good enough to get their attention away from work and be a parent to you. You see? So everything is seen relative to us, even though it's not. And part of what we do in consciousness work is to see things as they really were and put it in the larger context. The larger context may be that somebody was really mentally ill. And many people spend their whole lives trying to understand this person who is mentally ill. And here's what I want to put on the table. You can't. It's mental illness. There's no way you're going to understand that, except spending your wheels and your whole life and your focus of energy that could be creating a wonderful life for yourself on trying to understand something that cannot be understood. You see? Sometimes you recognize that the parent was insecure. And you understand that because you carry it in yourself and you're working on it now. And when you get through it, you're going to have enormous empathy for them. But it's not going to affect you anymore. There are a whole lot of ways. Psychology is very confusing. You keep in mind I'm doing a radio show here, okay? And what I do is a kind of energy psychology, all right? And what I'm wanting you to realize is it's a lot more complicated than you can talk about in a radio show. Although, like this subject, we are talking about complicated things and trying to have you understand these things in the most simplistic manner I can come up with. Well, let me tell you, it has to be simplistic for me to understand, okay? I'm serious, you know? I've always laughed and said, I'm not smart enough to do this work without God channeling through me, because I'm telling you, it's complicated. People are making bad things good and good things bad in their own psychology, and we got to find out what that is, and we've got to dismantle that so good things can be good and bad things, not that they're any bad, but undesirable things that are not optimal for your health and happiness. And here's a really good thing: things that are not in keeping with your highest self, things that are not compatible with that, really do need to be resolved and released. Okay, so going back to our point here, fear is not a force. Evil is not a force. I think evil, and listen, I believe in evil, but evil is the absence of love. In and of itself, I don't think it's a force. I've lived an awful long time. I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a lot of evil acts. I've seen most of the clients that I have had through the years have had evil acts done to them. It is not a force. It's the absence of good. It's the absence of love. It's the absence of these higher levels of God. Now, when you're in the throes of your fear of whatever nature, it feels like it's a force. I have a lot of people who are really imbued in the ego child's mind, and these people are usually believing of their emotions. And guys, that's not a good thing to believe. Emotions are signposts saying, look deeper. They're not to just scare you to death. Here is anxiety on the post, and everybody goes, oh my God, anxiety, and they go into it without saying, it's just a sign that I need to look deeper because something's making me anxious. You see, you can be in there dealing with it, or you can be the observer. We call it the neutral observer, watching yourself be anxious. That's the part of you that can then figure out what set you off. What's the trigger? I always ask my clients, okay, something's happened in the last 24 hours to 36 hours that set you off. It might be a series of things. And these things are discounted for whatever reason. They are ignored. As a matter of fact, I have a client that was a hard case for a while. Not anymore, but a hard case for a while, because she kept saying to herself, and boy did this beat her up, I should be able to handle that. I should be able to handle that. So she never saw what in the moment was bothering her and what she could resolve right then. So it didn't accumulate, because then it would accumulate, and Lord have mercy. Then she didn't sleep for days or months, right? And that she just completely was so harsh to herself in this aspect that I'm putting on the table right now. She was one of the folks, like other people, that said, it's like a freight train coming down the track. There's nothing I can do to stop it. It's going to overtake me. No, that's not true. You're just embroiled in it. You're not using the information well. Do you understand? And we do have to use the information well. So we have to observe it and go, okay, let's look deeper. Let's look deeper. Only then do you find what the fear is all about, what the anxiety is all about. Only then are you able to resolve the issue because you now have words for it and you can see it in a better perspective. You start out in the perspective of the ego child's mind, of course. And then you put it in a larger context according to what the truth is. And most of the time, I'm going to tell you, you need somebody to help you do that. I think I mentioned last week that when I was teaching my advanced class, and they are advanced, let me tell you, when I challenged them with this about 2 years ago, and I said, so what is the truth beyond that lie? Everybody recognizes that's a lie or a partial truth, right? Everybody goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll say, then good, what is the truth? The truth, not 180 degrees the opposite way. They couldn't tell me. So we had to tell them for a while before they caught on and realized what the real truth was. The honest to God truth. Emotions are simply a signpost. When you believe your emotion and you run with it instead of looking at it, you do yourself a disservice. This is why you believe there is a force of fear when there is not. It is your own force. You get it? It's you that's doing it. One other thing to put on the table here is everybody in the whole world starts out in fear. It's the ego child's mind. Before the ego child's mind forms at 18 months old, all time for you and for everybody in the world is right now. This is why a real fundamental issue for everybody is if that the pain's going to last forever. Everybody's going to feel that way. Because it did at one time because of our perception. The whole reason the ego comes along and forms and the ego child's mind forms is so all time won't be now, and we're projecting into the future based on the hurt in the past to make sure that doesn't happen again, no matter what it is. And by the way, some of the people that struggle the most are the ones that just say, oh, but I had a happy childhood. I can tell you that I know a woman, she was not a client of mine, but I know a woman who was spoiled rotten as an only child. She had some real talents, by the way, particularly one very important talent, and she got away with everything because she had this incredible talent. Her mother and father were more slaves to her at one point than they were mother and father. She has come to a very bad end, a very lonely, unhealthy, bad end, because she had the perfect childhood. As a matter of fact, who was it? Was it Bruno Bettelheim? I think it was. There's a psychologist, psychoanalyst, his name was Bruno Bettelheim. He wrote a book called The Uses of Enchantment. No, I don't think it was that. The Courage to Create, Eric Fromm. And the psychologist put on the table that, and the reason I'm quoting Bruno Bettelheim is because he said something similar. It is the light and dark of our lives that we are trying to resolve, and it makes us more creative people. That's what both of those people said. The light and dark makes us more creative. Somebody that just, has everybody wait on them doesn't have that advantage. Somebody that has, by the way, a perfectly dreadful experience and nothing but a dreadful experience and never sees shards of light come through. That's terrible too. But all of you pretty much fit into the category of light and dark. You've seen both. You're still trying to resolve that inside. Guess where the path is to really have it resolved once and for all, and to go down more deeply than you've ever been into yourself and make it all right. Make yourself finally happy. It's in the opening of consciousness and the journey. You all have all heard me talk about the threshold exercise. It's kind of unique to our organization, and it puts things in good perspective. If you draw a line across, again, a horizontal line across the page, and then you put a vertical line through that, almost everything starts, in fact, everything starts in the ego child's mind. And you go on this journey, go on this journey, go on this journey, go on this journey, and it crosses the line and becomes something else. Well, your fear becomes love. Here's a real easy one. Once you resolve this ego child's mind, it's not active in your nervous system anymore, and you become who you really are. Okay? Now, along the way, we have all of these things on this list, and more, probably. These are just the ones that I see so often in my practice and have for years that I'm talking to you about now. But once you cross that line, anything, selfishness becomes altruism. Not automatically like that, but the further you go, yeah, that's exactly right. Unconditional love is entirely possible, but you better get on the cart because it's a trajectory to that. I can't stand it when the world talks about unconditional love and has no idea what it is. Let's just talk about love. There are not many people that understand that. It's the energy of God inside of you, is that aspect of you. You are the aspect of God known as you. That energy is nothing but love, but because God is everything, God is also your fear and your ego child's mind, because it's a perfect system. And the sacred journey that you're on right now to listen to a show like this is that. Fear to love. That's what it is. It's a good journey. So every single thing that you complain about, that you're ashamed of, there's no reason for shame because everybody does all this, but everything starts in the ego child's mind, and if you will go on this journey, man, it's going to change. Later, soon, it will change because it'll cross the line. And it becomes gifts of all sorts. I was a real rebellious kid. I had a dad that was, he meant well. He was a good man. My mother and my father were good people, but my father liked control, and he liked dictatorship. And his way, it was his way of the highway, right? Well, I'm going to tell you a quick story about this. This is so interesting. I think I've mentioned it somewhere along the line, but this has something to do with it too. So I remember that we lived on a real quiet little street. Okay, that was our first home after we left New York when we came down south. All right, we lived on a little quiet street. And I saw apparently, I don't know, a dog maybe or a neighbor or something in the yard across the street. My father and I were walking over there, and I dashed out to cross the street in the road. No car was coming, but I didn't hold my father's hand, and I was young enough that when he told me I had to hold his hand across the street, I probably should have, right? Man, he went after me. I got the worst spanking. Okay, I learned to be very cautious and to, if not hold his hand, to think about everything, to hold his hand. And that and other lessons like that taught me to obey my father or I'd get in big trouble. Now let's flash forward. I'm in my 20s, late 20s probably. I don't quite remember, but somewhere in my 20s. And I was going over to see an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen for about 10 years. So I as I was driving, I went, I want to buy her some big thing of flowers. So I was in a neighborhood I did not know, in a part of town that wasn't particularly good, and I see a florist. So I stop the car and I go in, and I'm noticing that there's a man lingering outside. He's kind of, he's outside smoking a cigarette. And I see him watch me go into the florist. I bought the flowers, and when I came out, the man started following me and then chasing me, and I jumped into the car really fast. All the windows were up. This was an old crank, car. It wasn't the automatic thing. And he started beating on the car and beating on the window and saying, "Open the door." And my hand went to the handle. All of a sudden it was like, holy hell, what am I doing? And I cranked up the car and I got out of there, called the police. And I realized that I had so taken in that lesson to listen to my father's voice, to listen to a man's voice, that I was about to make a really stupid mistake. If that didn't propel me into a whole different direction and trajectory for my life, that and similar things, I had to find out my voice, because the only voice that was there was my father telling me what to do. No. That could also get you killed. So I am saying to all of you that we've got to find out who we are now past all those lessons. That's what consciousness does. That's what authenticity does. And true happiness lies right where we're talking about. Because you have a sense of self. You know who you are. You don't false represent. You just are. You use whatever talents and gifts and abilities are coming up in you. You try to help. You love. Now, this isn't a love that always makes you feel good. Because I've got to tell you right now that I don't do sessions for people if I'm not loving them. I will not do that. Because my job is to say some very hard things to people, to kick them in the butt from time to time. But I'm trying to get them beyond the enemy within and into, I'll hold that space for them to get to a healthy place. But I'm going to push them. And if you work with me, I'll push you. But, it's real funny because usually by the time anybody's giving me trouble in their session, it's like, I'm going to fight you for you. What the hell are you doing saying you can't do that? And they all laugh. And they say, we can't believe we're paying you for this. And I'll say, yeah, what does that say about you? But guys, what I'm wanting to put on the table here is love is different from what you think it is. It isn't always feel good. It isn't always romantic. It isn't always romanticism. It isn't always just something loving. It isn't always hearing something good about yourself. Real love is the truth. In love. In caring. I don't care if you're a narcissist. I'm going to love you anyway. But my job for 2 hours is to get you out of that and into something larger. You see? Good. All right. I hope that explains enough of that point, Miss Cat. I don't know why I'm not hearing from you all today. My husband was down here, and he said that he wanted to do some changes. Those of you who've lived with me for a while understand that we are living in a very remote location. And what happens is we haven't had the speed now to support our Blog Talk Radio platform and our Facebook Live platform. I think we finally gotten enough speed now. Yay! So I hope you all are hearing me out there, but it's a little bit disturbing because usually by this time in the show, I'm seeing you all write me. And for some reason, I'm seeing absolutely nothing today, and we don't have any phone calls. So I'm not sure what's going on. But if you are hearing this, please write me so I'll know. But I don't think we are. So I hope this is at least going out, and I'll talk to him later about why I'm not getting any messages. But anyway, I'm not. Okay. Well, hello everyone that is listening. If you are listening, I hope you are. So our next point is that to be authentic, we really need to learn, part of our learning experience to be happy is to learn the art of communication. You see, in my book, there's communication, and there's the art of communication. The art of communication is knowing who you're talking to and how to approach them. There's a real art to it, and you might need to learn that. In other words, you don't just make demands. One realizes that, everybody's got their own agendas, and you're about to interrupt somebody's agenda. So you have to be respectful of that, for example. Okay? So it doesn't just become, honey, do this. It becomes, sweetie, I know you're doing something important, but let me put something on the list that I tried to do myself and I can't do. It's just too heavy for me, or too this or too that. If you wouldn't mind, when you're free, if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it. That's the art of communication, right? It's very respectful for communication. I think a lot of people that have been reared in any kind of dictatorial home think they always have to have an answer right away, too. So you may be in a business, and somebody can stop you in the hall and say, what do you think about this? Or tell us these those figures, and you don't know. Now, if you're in the ego child's mind, you think, oh my God, I don't know, and something's wrong with me. I say you're not supposed to know that kind of stuff anyway, and carry it around in your head. So what you want to do is always have this quote in your head and say, I will find that out for you by, and give them a time so they feel nice and safe, and make sure that you either call at that time or before and give them those stats. But you don't have to feel guilty about not having that in your head. That happened the other day with a client of mine who said, oh, I felt like I should have known. It's like, just tell him you'll call him in a minute when you get back to your desk. Okay? All right. This is mainly about being sensitive to who you're talking, to whom you're talking to whom you're talking, period. Sorry, no to. I think a lot of times that never occurs to us because we're in our own agenda. And we all have our own agenda, and I want you not to give up your agenda. That's very important. It's where you're coming from, right? But you've got to add the awareness that you're talking to someone else as well who has their agenda. So this becomes a loving dialogue. Now, that may surprise you, and you may find yourself saying that, oh my God, well, who doesn't know that? I'm going to tell you, a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that this is a dialogue. People that defend themselves, talk too fast, talk over you, become manic when you disagree with them, we can keep the list going, don't know how to do that. There are a lot of people in the world that feel very threatened by other information, by information that messes up their plans, by information that is philosophically very different from what they believe. And I love a good dialogue. I think a good dialogue is great. Some of you all that call me and disagree, we have lots of fun talking about that, right? But there are some people that have never learned to do that. Now, if you're studying consciousness, you're going to learn to do that. That becomes very important, okay? And we have a program that will help you and teach that. So you don't have to do what you're doing to cover up insecurity. There's a very insecure base. You may not know, or you may lose control. That usually is at the base of this. Those are the most common things, right? And you get scared. That's part of this too. We need to be able to talk to each other calmly, with an open mind. You know, I love it when I'm talking to someone that might give me a different point of view. How interesting. I learned something, you know. I might not believe what they believe still, but I will find them very intelligent for saying it and for having thought that through. All right. Okay. The next one. Connect the physical body to the mind, emotion, and spiritual bodies. Let's talk about that for a minute, because all this, you've got 4 bodies. You've got your mental body, your emotional body, your physical body, and your spiritual body. The spiritual body being the energetic body, and it's all the bodies, by the way, and its own. That's why when we pass out of our physical bodies, that we still exist. We exist as the spiritual body. Certainly less dense molecules, I would imagine, and but its own thing. All right. So, according to issues, we can use just a few of these bodies. We can suppress the emotional body. We can be nothing but the mental body. We can suppress the physical body. Okay. We can just put all our energy into being smart and intellectual and that. Have you ever seen people that are talking heads in business? They'll get up there and they're talking heads. You feel, honestly, if you disconnected them from the neck down, you'd get the same information, because it's all right here. Nobody is right there with you, with the whole of them, right? And of course, peak performance is about every cell of the body being on, and it is about being connected mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, and giving all you got, right? I saw a darling young woman the other day. A friend asked me to assess her performance. She sang something on video. And she was precious. I mean, the girl was like 14 years old, right? And she had not ever been trained. Her voice was lovely. I mean, it's maturing. Her voice was lovely. But this was what was going on. She was her body didn't match what she was singing about, you see? There was no expression through it. And it was interesting. He called me later and he said, I gave her your notes. And she went, oh, I can see, I can see that. So good. I'm very glad there are people that catch on certainly very fast to that. I think it's really important to make sure that when you are, quite frankly, anywhere, that you use all of you to be there. I've also known people that have been so hurt emotionally that they're non-emotive, they're kind of a blank when they're talking to you. Whatever you are, my dears, that doesn't mean you have to stay that way. That means there's some work to do. And there is not one person walking this earth that does not have work to do. And we'll put that on the table. So there is no use all of us feeling sorry for ourselves. Oh, I didn't have a mother that loved me. I didn't have a father that loved me, or anything else. Okay? Because everybody's got something. And the bottom line is, you're going to work on yourself or not. That's the bottom line. I want to put one other thing on the table about this point. When we're in the womb, we're storing anomalies, emotional anomalies that come through the chemistry of the mother, we store them. They affect, believe it or not, the energetic body of us. We'll not understand something. After all, little kids, especially little kids still in the womb, are just undeveloped love. That's really all they are. Everything is undeveloped. Heck, the brain doesn't even start developing until you're in your 20s, you know? Everything takes a while. So, you've got a distortion of any kind. I mean, in our program, we have several things, partially formed energy here. You may have mixed energy with a parent. We find distortions in the energy field. That's one of the things we do, because we've got to make your energetic body very sound, because all this emotional stuff that is stored in your emotional body is going to be transferred to the energetic body when it's resolved. So we've got to have an integrous energetic body. You understand? And that's why, by the way, you wake up spiritually. Everybody does that does this work. Now, one of the things I want to put on the table is most people ignore these things in the spiritual body, and yet when you're born and you come out of the womb and you start living your life, you're seeing the world according to the distortions that happened energetically. You're trying to make sense. Let's say your mom is not real thrilled that she's pregnant. Let's say she worries about that. She goes home. She tells your dad. He says, oh, yeah, how are you going to pay for another kid? And they have a row. You're getting those energies. Do you understand that? You're getting them through chemistry. And then you have that stored. Now, that's not in keeping with undeveloped love. That's not in keeping with what you're coming in to do. That's certainly not in keeping with everybody's highest self, which is also undeveloped. And so you are born and you start looking for that kind of thing to explain that. You have to have it explained in your mind. This is all your perception. Because if you do not have it explained, it's going to be hard to live. Your world has to make sense. You know, if you're born, I'm thinking of one person in particular, to a crazy woman, and she is absolutely mentally ill. The only thing you can do is say, man, I'm a real bad kid. I just don't know what to do. I am, and it's all about you and how bad you are and, everything, when she's the one that has the mental illness. You see, this is what we do as kids. This is the kind of thing we got to get straight with ourselves. Who are you underneath all of this? I'm going to tell you that you're simply the aspect of God you are. With all the beneficence and gifts and the abilities and the unconditional love that part of you is capable of, which is huge. What is in the way of your getting there is the ego, child's mind, and these distortions, you see. Now, so you come out of the womb and you're looking for all those things that, and this is beyond words, right? That make what happened to you in the womb make sense. So you have you have an understanding. So you can go on. We're not in a random place at all. See, a kid in a random place has their survival threatened. You understand? If they can kind of understand everything, even if it's wrong, even if they are making assumptions based on appearances, they have an understanding. They're safer. You see? Okay. Once you have those distortions, you come out and emotionally start seeing the world according to that. You see the emotional thing, and you also form ideas about things, which is part of your mental system, mental body. If you ignore all of that long enough, your physical body starts breaking down. Let's say you came out of a very, very anxious childhood, all right? And you've done absolutely no work on yourself. And you have, you had certain things in the womb that you didn't understand. You came out, you saw everything that scared you and made you anxious. It gets amplified. You go into a cycle of building up anxiety, feeling relief from anxiety, building up anxiety, feeling relief from anxiety. That's your life. You don't think your body's going to break down? Your body's going to break down. It's just the way it is. At any point in this process, if the body breakdown isn't far along enough, there could be something that's done about this. I've told the story in the past. I think it bears telling it again. I had a client who listens to the show. Darling, if you're out there, I love this story, all right? And she could say this is the way it happened. She came to me and she said that that every 2 years she had a horrific car accident. It was cyclic, and the last one almost killed her. And she was very concerned because within a few months, the next one was coming up. And so you bet I jumped on that one, right? We found things. And in a few months, she came in for her session and she said, "Oh, I'm so pissed off." And I said, "What?" She said, "Somebody's keyed my car." And I didn't know why, but I said, "Well, let's go out and look at that." And we went out to the driveway, and sure enough, somebody had unkindly keyed the car, maliciously keyed the car. But all of a sudden, Spirit told me, "Well, there's your accident." And I said, "That's a great access key. Now let's go in and get that and have this over." And it was. This is how it works. You work on yourself, you work on yourself, you work on yourself. These things get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and one day they go away. But you got to work on yourself. You got to address what's wrong. If you're there, I'm going to go back to the signpost of emotion, and you're just rolling around in that anxiety, instead of really finding out what's underneath and addressing it and finding out all your tricks and convolutions in the emotional body. Because see, the ego, child's mind, wants you to keep those things because at least you're alive. It's charged with you understanding your world according to appearances and keeping you alive. That's all it cares about. It doesn't care if you're happy. Your higher self is the one that's calling you to happiness. You see? So what does that mean? That means that we need to resolve the ego child's mind. And it all can be done. But you have to be willing to be challenged. Because part of you just wants to hold on to that. And part of you does not. So that part of you that does not is listening to a show like this. Okay. Let's go to our next point. I think this is important to recommend that you stay in your own journey. And what do I mean by that? Well, in our tiny little town, we had a fight in the parking lot of the store the other day when all this coronavirus thing happened, right? Apparently, now this is all second or third hand, apparently some old man came out of the store or was going in the store and he saw a group of young people standing in a clump who were not social distancing and who did not have masks on. Well, he went over there in his militancy and blessed him out. And one of them turned around and punched him in the nose. And I've laughed about that with my friends because I said, man, there's so many things wrong with that. I don't even know where to begin. Because I do believe that we must do what we need to do for us. If it's comfortable wearing a mask, by God, wear a mask. I also use Everclear or some of these real high octane alcohols like Everclear, Golden Grain, some called diesel out there that I think is 180 proof. Scotch and bourbon are not going to do it for you, kids. They don't have the proof that you need to kill viruses and bacteria on your hands. We put it in a spray bottle, spray our gloves, spray our masks. We boil our masks too at the height of all of this. The point of my telling you a story like that is I think there was a mistake made to begin with. We all have a right. This is my belief. You don't have to believe it or not. You can believe it or not. To live and die the way we choose. We can and are capable of keeping ourselves safe. We don't have to go over to those people. We can wear our masks. We can wear our gloves. We can spray the hell out of everything. We can boil the hell out of everything. We do whatever we need. But we don't need to pick a fight in the parking lot and get somebody punched in the nose when the young people are already, God knows what. You don't know who you're talking to. It's just not a good idea. Tell yourself what to do. Be responsible for yourself. And let other people be on their own journey and you stay on yours. We do not have to control anything in this life but ourselves and what we're doing and who we are. Another aspect of that, with my saying stay on your own journey, the other aspect I want to talk about is this. Through the years, and I'm very grateful for this, a lot of people have found value in this teaching and in this philosophy and in our sessions, all right, which are all about you for 2 solid hours. And I'm delighted, but they go home and they'll harangue their partners, their spouse, they'll harangue their friends, they'll harangue their mothers and fathers. You've got to go on this journey too. And I'm going to say nobody's going on this journey but you. It is your own personal journey. The odd thing is I think everybody wants to belong and they get afraid that they'll be entirely alone if they don't have somebody with them. The fact is, no matter what the relationship is, it's better at the end of this journey. No, not that there's an end, but at one point everything changes and it's all better because you become more loving. It's so funny. I've heard for years people come in and say, the neighbor down the street all of a sudden has turned incredibly loving. Oh, all of a sudden my spouse, oh my God, he's turned incredibly loving. Guess what? It isn't about them. It's about you. You have changed. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And when I point that out, everybody goes, oh yeah. Nice marker along the way to say how well you're doing, right? Yeah, it is. So I think that's a really important thing. Don't browbeat them, cajole them into personal growth. Don't wait for them. Don't put off your thing. Start working. I think that one of the most effective things is to live and lead by example. Why don't you become more loving? And let's see how they respond to you and if they want the joy and happiness that you've found. If so, they'll do their own version of this, right? It's true. Do know that it is insecurity that makes you want to take somebody along instead of just going yourself, right? All right, now, the next one is you've got to stop trying to be right. Trying to be right is trying to control everything. You get that? You don't get to do that. You get to make choices and live your life according to you, but we don't get to control anything. We have the right to respond the way we want to. People will tell you there's nothing good and bad in the world. It's our response that's good or bad. And I do believe that. I do. I mean, people live, people die, people are born, people divorce, people get fired, people get great new jobs. It's our response to it that makes all the difference in the world. I've laughed for years, and you'll hear of this a little later on too, that when I have found something incredibly deep in someone's psychology, and I put that on the table for them, some of my clients go, "Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's great. Okay, let me write this down so I can see what I'm doing and really be aware of it." Another response is, "Oh, I can't believe I'm doing that. Oh, how embarrassing. I just can't believe I've done. Oh my God." Can you hear the difference? One says, "I don't want you to take that away. I'm not going to learn anything from this. I want to hold on to that a little longer." That's what beating yourself up is, right? The whole reason you're doing it is you don't think enough of yourself to be real and authentic. So, it's just going to propel you right back into doing it again, maybe disguised with different words here and there. But the wonderful response to all that is, "Wow, thank you. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to put that here. I want to make sure I don't go back and do that or trick myself into another way. How great that I know that now." Okay. We have to be very careful. We have layers and layers and layers of trying to control things. There are control tactics that you don't even know are control tactics. For example, I have a dear friend, a dear client, who is struggling to come out of this now. But she works very hard. She overworks, puts tasks before people. Says she wants a love interest, but goes home and gets in bed with a computer and plays on a computer for a while, and then goes to sleep. And it happens every day. And on the weekend, she does nothing but stay in and rest because she's so tired. It's all an excuse, every bit of it. She's scared to death to have a relationship. She had a very bad family, by the way. Very unkind, unloving, humiliating family. They humiliated her a lot. So her withdrawal, her isolation and withdrawal, her saying, "Oh, I'm just too tired because I overwork," is control. She's controlling things. Make no mistake about it. And she does not plan to change, but she will. She's already allowing me, and she defended this for years. She's already saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing it. I want to change it." So, we're working on that every week, all right? But here you get isolation and withdrawal that you would never say, "Here's my control issue." Overwork. Here's my control issue. But it's interfering with a whole wonderful life. By the way, those of you that are single out there, why do you want a partner? You need help? You worried about being financially independent on your own? You need somebody to take out the trash? None of those are good reasons. Here's the only good reason for you to have a partner. And I'm talking about in a conscious sense, beyond hormones, the desire to procreate, and all that kind of stuff that happens to us when we're younger. The truth of this is, you yourself do work on yourself, become a loving individual, and the natural thing to do is choose someone to give that to, and to create that loop of love. You want someone to help you complete the love that you are. But I always know that I've got a really good and conscious person that I'm working with, even though they're not there yet. When they sit there in front of me and they say, "I don't even know what love is. And I said, that is a great place to start. Because another place to start is to have somebody come in and think they know everything, and then you spend years sometimes breaking down that facade. Instead of just having somebody real sitting in the chair opposite you saying, help me, teach me, let's get going. You see? Help me find who I am on the inside. It's a great thing. All right. I think we have done everything about that. We can't, by the way, needing to be right is insecurity. Anybody who just really needs to be right, who overtalks, who's telling you how great they are in some way, who's defending what they do. By the way, remember what defensiveness is. It's agreeing actually with somebody else, even if they haven't said you aren't smart enough. They're thinking that, so they're projecting that on the other person. You're projecting that on the other person, and you're agreeing with them, and you haven't yet come to that agreement within yourself. Did that make any sense at all? Let me give you a more simple example of that. So if you are defending isolating and withdrawing on the weekends instead of going out and seeing friends, or at least dating online, keeping your social distance. If you are defending that, by your defensiveness, you agree with me that you shouldn't do that, and yet you're not ready to give it up inside. I hope that explains it a little better. It just means I'm not there yet, but I agree with you. And when I point that out to people, they go, damn, that's right. And then we're at a whole nother level of truth, right? Again, I'm going to be completely okay with you doing anything, but I am pushing you to do what is in your best interest to do ultimately. That's my job, you see. But you do what is not in your best interest until you do what is. All right, the next part of this, we don't make real fast progress. I don't make real fast progress. We haven't had any notices from folks, and we haven't had any calls. I don't know what's going on. All right, hope you're getting the message, though. The next point is you should look back at the cognitive distortions we've given you. We did lots of shows on cognitive distortions. 6 months ago, 8 months ago? There is also a wonderful article that I found on the internet that I took my lectures from, which is 50 of the most common cognitive distortions. I've forgotten the writer, forgive me, but I have lots of things I read. But you'll find it on the internet, and you ought to look at that and challenge yourself to every one of those, because you're doing them. Everybody's doing them. What are cognitive distortions? Things like mind reading other people instead of just asking what they're thinking. What else? Personalizing. It's all about me, 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 instead of finding out, asking, wait a minute, I'm trying to make this about me. I know it's not. So what happened here? What's going on that I don't know? You ask someone, you see? You will recognize a lot of those that you're doing, and you go about breaking each one, because those are things that come out of our ego child's mind. They have to go. See, the ego child's mind is the only thing that's blocking you. You remember how Dorothy and her friends tried to get to the Wizard of Oz, and the Wicked Witch kept popping up here and there, right? And hit a field of poppies, and what else happened to them? I'm trying to remember. Oh, well, anyway, they get to Oz, and Oz isn't even what they thought it was, right? There are a series of blocks. Well, guys, one of the reasons that's so popular in our collective psyche, that a movie like that, is because that's the way life works. You have a series of ego blocks, ego child's mind blocks that we have to learn past and get to find the truth. And what a beautiful little truth that was, that there's no place like home. It was there all along, but she really owned it by the end of the film, you see. All right. Look back at those cognitive distortions, or find that on the internet. That's really, really important work. Catch yourself when you're doing it. And even in front of somebody else, say, wait a minute, I just said something that wasn't true. And then reframe it according to what is true. Not according to your truth, that's egoic. According to the truth. When my husband and I got together 8.5 years ago, almost 9 now, hard to believe, Michael had never had any of this work. He didn't know anything about that. He's an Austrian. He was raised a little mass boy in the Catholic Church, right? And then I come along, right? One of the things that I think we worked out in the very beginning is I'd say something like saying that to me was not very respectful, right? And he'd say, you're trying to control me. And I'd say, all right, hang on. Let's look at this in a larger arena. The fact is, good marriages are based on the solid respect one person to another and back. It's not my rule. It is a rule for a good marriage. And all of a sudden he went, oh, that's absolutely right, you see. Put that on the table for you. There are things that get you where you're going, where you want to go, and things that do not. And it isn't about our personal rules. It is about, are we going to have this kind of marriage or this kind of marriage? The next point. You've heard me talk about this before, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this now because it's in other shows. But know and live by your own values. Find your value sheet online. Just find a value sheet, something that has a lot of values in there. Choose 3 values that you know are you now. Not that you want to be. Not that you want to be. Because I want to make sure that 100% of the time you live those 3 values. And don't just say you do, because you don't. Every single time, guys, that you are unhappy in a situation, you have crossed the boundary of one of those values or all 3 of them. But I want you to choose something that you are almost 100% of the time. And I want you to live with those 3 values, and I want you to make sure they're in every situation you do. You bring them into everything. You have it in your mind. I'm bringing that into the situation. When you talk to your child, when you talk to your boss, when you talk to your fellow employees, when you talk to your spouse, when you talk to your relationship, when you talk to your friends, make sure that you are bringing your values to that. Observe that when you don't, you are unhappy. When you've crossed your own boundary. When you haven't brought something forth to put on the table. You must know who you are. You must start living by your values. Now, once those 3 are in place, choose 2 more, put those in place, make sure that you're not crossing anything until all of them will become you. That's another way to get to your highest self, okay? Oh, how many values are out there? Lots of them. But that's another thing to keep in mind that will help you on your journey. Your values are the starting point of your authenticity. And by the way, your wisdom, which becomes your unique contribution to the world. Okay. Now, other people may have the same value as you. Why not? This world would be a poorer place if everybody didn't add their unique contribution, their voice, and what they know of the world. if we said, oh, Beethoven's Fifth has already been done, instead of all these marvelous artists interpreting Beethoven's Fifth, and by the way, every other thing, we'd have certainly a poorer world. A lot of people don't realize that. They use that as an excuse. I don't have anything to contribute. That other person is contributing what I have to give. You just haven't found who you are and your authenticity, because there's something authentic about you. Guys, if you sell, you know what I'm buying and what most people are buying? We're buying you and your, what do I want to say, your belief in whatever you're selling. By the way, if you don't have any belief in what you're selling, you either need to find it or you need to do something else. But we're not buying the product necessarily. We're buying you and what you think about the product and what we think about you, and whether you're honest or whether you're pulling our legs. Okay? We all have something to contribute here. But many of us don't add our spin, our voice. We just use it as an excuse. I have nothing to say. Well, if that's going to be your belief, you're not going to have anything to say. Instead of play with saying something, let it come out. Start expressing. This is what the arts have been for all along. And I'm not talking about artists that are making a profession out of this. I'm talking about just the art of living, the art of your voice, the art of writing, the art of painting, the art of expressing yourself just because. And most people go through life without ever expressing themselves. I take great delight in this, because for years I've worked with people that think they're not creative. Oh, I can't possibly give a business speech. Oh, no. And I turn them into the biggest stage hogs in the world. They love it now, right? I have a dear friend who is a client, and it has been a client for a long time, and she said for several years before we got to where we are now, oh, I'm not creative. Man, is she creative. She's one of the most creative people I know. She taught her children that she was not creative, and they probably weren't either, and everybody is very reluctant to express themselves. They're all clients now, and they express themselves, you see? And everybody's finding great joy in doing that, and so should you. Nothing's ever wrong in the arts. I've taught acting for years, and improvisation, and all forms of acting. And one of the things I always say to my actors is, I can never say that you've made a terrible decision. I can say it doesn't look good on camera. I can say, let's think this through. And there may be another, but I'm never going to say, don't express that. Nothing's ever wrong, because it's an expression, right? According to you. That's really very freeing in the arts, isn't it? I had a funny experience happen to me concerning this. I've always loved to paint and draw. The truth is, and I'm being very honest, I'm not being self-deprecating, I'm not very good, but I've always loved it. It certainly developed into appreciation for other people's art. Oh my God, I really do appreciate that, even though I'm not very good. And I don't try it very often these days because my time doesn't permit. I went to college and I took an art course, and the teacher did not like what I did. Did not like one thing I did. And from that point on, I pretty much gave up art. Now, on the downside, that was a shame. On the upside, it certainly channeled me into what I did do well, okay? Which is great. All these things aren't tragedies, because that's what made it not a tragedy. I mean, so I didn't go in the direction of something that wasn't very good. But here's the irony. I went to Santa Fe several years ago with a friend of mine, and all I wanted to do was look at art. And I walked into a gallery, and it was a house on, the Canyon Road, I think is what's called, where all the art galleries is. It was a house, and you walked into this house, and it had a entrance hall, and you walked right into, the entrance hall wall, and there on the wall was a painting I would have done back in back in college. It was my style exactly. And the whole gallery had this particular artist, I don't remember what her name was, it was a woman, of her paintings. And had I kept on, that was what I would have done. And she had a whole exhibition in Santa Fe. It was such a wonderful thing. I didn't mourn the fact that I hadn't done it. I went and said, for God's sake, I ought to take up my painting again and just have some fun. You see? See how it works? It's no big deal. We have these things throughout our lives that show us, oh yeah, you could have done that, but we wanted you to go this way. And that's the way you went. It's an interesting world. We've got 13 minutes left. Where am I going to go next? Okay. Here's the next one. If there is something that I see all the time, two things actually, that really stop this process of evolvement and growth and, quite frankly, thinking and feeling straight according to your ascended mind, it is the fact that we avoid, and in that, we don't cooperate. Two real big words. We avoid and we don't cooperate. Now, the avoidance is tricky because you think you have a lot of good things that explain it. Like when I was talking in the early days to my friend who never goes out, wants a partnership, never goes out, works too hard, collapses on the weekends, right? She said, oh, I've got to rest. I work so hard, I've got to rest. First of all, she works too hard for the money she makes. And second of all, if she wants a relationship, she's got to stop avoiding. And I said, all this is avoidance. And she agreed, finally. Oh, yeah, I'm just avoiding everything. So my job then is to break down her avoidance so she can live a whole and dimensional life and get what she wants, what she says she wants. She's fantasizing about it instead of making it a reality, you see. And we've said before, fantasy is its own reward. So we use excuses to avoid. Now, in consciousness studies, you better call yourself on every excuse. It's just an excuse. I always know when that I'm getting somewhere with somebody when they get real quiet, and if they say, I can't think of any reason not to do it that isn't an excuse. Now that is a wise man or woman, because there are no excuses. You either do it or you don't do it, and you better challenge your avoidance. So avoidance is a big worldwide problem. I'll tell you, if it's severe enough, it'll probably kill you. I don't want that happening to anybody. But I do know people that it has killed because they won't do anything else. They'll have a million excuses not to. Don't avoid anything. Look at it all. We're supposed to look at it all. We're supposed to evolve and grow, you see? We're supposed to cooperate with our highest selves. You've been cooperating with the ego child's mind because everybody does until they cooperate with the higher mind. Then we toggle back and forth. It's like we have a leg in both. And then we see what we're doing there, and then finally we can cross over and live who we really are. I wish that for you. Really, I do. The next one. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a dark side, and so do I. Everybody does. We are made of the duality of God. We are made of the ego child's mind, the fear-based self, the self that believes in the absence of God and total lack, and we have a fullness of God's side that is love-based and believes in the abundance of this world. Okay, we have both sides. A lot of people that are living their inauthentic selves are doing one or the other. They're indulging in the dark side, or they're building up and saying, I'm just great, oh, life is just, and that's not true either. The fact is, we have both. You have to be aware of it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to work on it and resolve some of those issues that make you dark. You have to own it and claim it and own it and assimilate it into the larger whole, which is, by the way, nothing but love. Only then do you have a decision to be the larger self rather than the lesser self. The lesser doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. That's not what I mean. It's just not potentialized. If you want to reach your potential, it's in your authenticity. It just is. And I'll tell you something else. There are all sorts of talents and gifts and abilities that come up in your authentic self that you did not even know you had. But they're there, I assure you. Only by our acknowledging both selves and doing work on ourselves can you choose to be the highest self and to think with that mind. Most of us go through life reacting, and the reactor part of us is out of the ego child's mind. We react to things rather than choose things. You see? At one point in your process with me, we're going to challenge your reactions. We're going to see that everything is a reaction. You know? Somebody tells you you can't do something, by God, you do it. That's great. I'm glad you did it. Congratulations. But you did it in reactivity. How much better could it be if you do it in choice and love? See? So it becomes very important at one point to challenge the motivations of why we're doing things. And look at that. It is absolutely life-affirming when you are making a choice. Until you work on yourselves to some degree, you don't have any choices. You only have reactions. You respond to life and react to life instead of saying, look at all the choices I have. I choose this one. That's important. The next one. We have 7 minutes to go. I want you to realize that every time you use an issue, an ego child's mind issue, you are reinforcing that issue. You are convincing yourself you need to do it and that you have no other choice. And you will make it again and again and again. Then, by your habitually doing this, you create a rut. That's what depression is. So, if you are going to get out of depression, if you've already created it, you're going to have to do something different, even though you don't want to. Your emotions, your energy level says, I don't want to. And I say, if you're going to change this, what you want doesn't matter. Do it. Do it. You've got to start making different decisions, getting different results, finding different interests, and it takes energy. You know, one of the laws of the universe is that new order always comes out of chaos. Stars explode and forms new galaxies. That's chaos. Happens in your home when you bring a new baby or a new puppy home, and everybody's schedule goes all to hell, right? And then new order comes out of that. When you make a recipe in the kitchen, it's all chaos as you mix it up in the bowl. It comes out as a wonderful cake. The whole world works on the principle of chaos to order. My husband, who's a physicist, an engineer, heard me lecture on this one time. He said, you know what you need to tell people? That change requires energy. So I'm telling you right now, that change requires effort. You have got to make the effort to change. Very important. And if you can't make the effort in your own behalf, if you're not worth it to you, call me. We got some work to do. Okay? It's extremely important, these things that we're talking about right now. I'm going to stop right there now, and we'll take up where we left off next week. Where did we leave off? Okay, I left off right here. We will start there next week. Anyway, darlings, these things are enormously important. I don't mean to inundate you. I do mean to inundate you. The chaos to order theory is something I really rely on. I like to throw too much information at you, so you'll be a little jumbled when you listen to all this. Because if you're a little jumbled, what is that? Chaos. Usually cellular chaos, mental chaos. There's some sort of chaos going on. And then what's going to come out of it? Something that is new order. The next step for you. That's one of the things I can do for you on these shows. Darlings, I love you very much, and I want you to stay well out there. Listen, I appreciate everything that you all are doing to get the word around about these shows. I can't thank you enough. Our community grows every week. Please send these shows out. I think you can send these shows out on Blog Talk Radio. I think they're on your screen. There's something that says you can send these out to your social media. Please do that when you find a show that you really think means something to you, or to all of the show, to all your friends. That means a lot. All of them, of course, won't particularly like this, but a good number of them will. And that's who we're trying to reach right now, and you're really the key to that for us. So I want to thank you for everything you've done so far. You really have done a lot to grow our community. We appreciate it with all our hearts. I appreciate it with everything I've got. We have a good team over here. And by the way, we are going to be announcing some new classes and things like that that are going to come up in a little while. By the way, after this lecture series on authenticity and happiness, I'm planning to do a big series. I haven't done this for several years on creating the life you want and how to do it. So stay tuned for that. That'll be lots of fun. Let's do a quick prayer. God, thank you so much for all of our friends, for the liking, the sharing, the friending, and the following. I can't thank you enough for all of that. We ask now that everybody, after the processing is done with this lecture, find something that is in their best interest to do, something that they can challenge themselves to do and they find great value in, because it is who they are in a more authentic way. We thank you so much for all of this, and now we ask that all of these issues, blocks, needs to hold on to them. Vestiges and related issues, identities over identities, sympathies over sympathies, definitions of self, and roles they've played that are no longer in keeping with their highest and most love-centered self. We ask that they start dropping away, that these dear people truly emerge as who they are and contribute to the world through their wisdom of authenticity. We thank you so much, dear God. We say this prayer in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to the show. Thank you, guys. We love you. Have a great week. See you next week. All right. Bye-bye.